Welcome to another episode of Total Football Talk. I'm Anthony.
And I'm Eric.
And this is top 10 most intriguing Super Bowls of all time. As promised, since I started the last one, Eric, I will allow you to start the first one. Your number 10 most intriguing Super Bowl of all time is?
My number 10 most intriguing Super Bowl of all time, drum roll please. This might be a head scratcher for some, but to me it's intriguing because it's never happened before. Super Bowl 47, the Harbaugh Bowl. Who would get the best of the brother? Jim or John? It ended up being John beating Jim down in New Orleans, which coincidentally had a blackout of it of like some 20-something minutes. It was just intriguing. It was the second Super Bowl since 2002 that did not have a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning or a Ben Roethlisberger that had a Joe Flacco. And man, did he have a great first half. Then the 49ers stormed back, but the Ravens were able to hold off the Niners. And yeah, there was a lot of head scratching at the end of the game on why some plays were called, but you get that in every game pretty much. But the intriguing factor really for me was the Harbaugh Bowl. Who was going to get the better end of each of the brothers?
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, my number 10 most intriguing Super Bowl of all time is Super Bowl 16. So many reasons this is intriguing. The Bengals had just changed their uniforms in 1981 to the stripes instead of the Bengals written across the helmet, which everyone loved and was such an awesome, sleek, sweet look. They had a really great wide receiver who won Rookie of the Year. Did not turn out to have a great career, but had a great rookie campaign in Chris Collinsworth. Ken Anderson was near and dear to everyone's heart. He was kind of like the Drew Brees of that era, okay? A guy that was a great guy off the field. On the field, he was always good, and he led his teams to some pretty amazing games. Never quite the Super Bowl until that year. You got Joe Montana, who came on the scene the previous year in 1980 when he came back from being down 28-3. Should sound familiar. We just talked about that. Against the New Orleans Saints. Came roaring back and won the game. Might have even been 28-0. And then in 1981, led his team to a 13-3 record. Got to the Super Bowl with the catch, which was one of, in my opinion, it might just be the greatest championship game of all time, NFC championship game of all time. And then got to the Super Bowl. And then the game itself was amazing because not only did you have these two new franchises that had never been to the Super Bowl before, okay? Never been. But not only had they never been, because the Rams had never been in 1979, Super Bowl 14. But the Rams had won a championship in their franchise's history before the Super Bowl was around. And the Rams had been relevant throughout the 70s. They were always on the doorstep. These were two franchises that never made it out of the divisional round, with the exception of San Francisco in 70 and 71. And then that was it. The 49ers were non-existent. They were the laughingstocks just 3 years earlier. They roll out to a 20-0 lead. Then the Bengals come roaring back. The Niners take a 26-21 lead late in the game, or 23-21 lead. They extend it to 26-21. There was a goal line stand in this game. The Bengals had the ball and were driving at the end of the game. There was a fumble early in the third quarter in this game that cost the Bengals some points. It's such a great game. And it was two new franchises in a weird city of Detroit. So there's so many reasons why, for me, this Super Bowl was just so intriguing. 49ers 26, Bengals 21. A great Super Bowl to boot, but definitely has to be one of the more intriguing Super Bowls of all time. Eric, what is your number 9?
My number 9 Super Bowl of all time actually is Super Bowl 43. It's Cardinals versus Steelers. And the intriguing part of it is, could Kurt Warner lead two different teams to a Super Bowl? Only one other quarterback that I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, has ever done that. That's Peyton Manning leading the Colts and the Broncos.
Yeah.
So he grew up or something.
Yeah.
Really could Kurt Warner
because he grew up. I just caught that, by the way, Eric. I just caught that because he grew up or something. Graduated from a Colt to a Bronco. All right.
But the Cardinals were 9-7. They got into the playoffs, and they really steamrolled through the playoffs in that game. or that season. And, I mean, they had a really good offense with Fitzgerald and Bolden and Warner. And could they get their first championship in what seems like forever, since I believe 47? And the Cardinals, they put up a great fight, and it was really good to see Kurt Warner, after the Super Bowl in 2000, come back with the Cardinals, and be very close to leading them to victory 9 years later, because he'd been somewhat of a journeyman. He ended up being in New York for a couple seasons, and the Cardinals were like, "Hey, we'll give you a shot." And I mean, he just took off. Like, it was just like a fountain of youth for him. And the Cardinals came very, very close, but Santonio Holmes' toe steps decided to say something different.
Yeah, that was crazy. All right, number 9 for me. There's so many reasons this Super Bowl is intriguing. Let me just give you the football perspective, and then I'll give you the political perspective, okay? The football perspective is this individual was an unbelievable quarterback in Tampa Bay and ran into some rough times and then went to the arena, went to the USFL. Wasn't wanted there. His wife dies tragically during that time. He's in a really bad place. He comes to the Washington Redskins. The Redskins lose Joe Theismann. That's why they went out and got this individual, and I'm talking about Doug Williams. And, their quarterback is a total douche canoe. No one likes Jay Schrader. Gary Clark, Art Monk, the offensive lineman, none of them liked him. Okay? But he's a talent. He's the famous waving off Doug Williams, which he ended up getting to do in the Super Bowl against the Broncos, which is this Super Bowl I'm talking about. But his journey is such an intriguing story in itself that you're captivated by it. Then you throw in the political element where he is the first black quarterback to start the Super Bowl and finally put to bed forever the myth about the black athlete playing quarterback. And I said, and I mean when I said, he put to bed that myth. The only people that perpetrate that myth anymore are the projectionist a-holes that are out there. Okay, if you hear somebody say, "Oh, this needs to happen because the blacks need to prove to all of those racist whites that they can do it too," what they're really telling you, just so you know, is the black needs to do this so they can prove to me that we're not better than they are. That's what they're essentially saying. Because the rest of us sit back and watch an athlete and go, "Oh my God, Devin Hester, one of the most amazing athletes I've ever seen wear a football uniform. I don't give a crap if that guy had purple skin and was from planet Neptune, okay? He was an athlete. I wanted to watch him because that's what normal people do." But you have to understand the time in the 80s. And in the 80s, there was this idea still, unfortunately, that there were stupid reasons that African Americans couldn't be quarterback in the NFL. And if they were, they wouldn't be good enough to win. Now, we know that's crap because Warren Moon and Randall Cunningham were so amazing. But this is really before Warren Moon and Randall Cunningham took off. Now, Warren Moon had a great year in 87 and made the playoffs. But Warren Moon really made his name in 88 and 89. Randall Cunningham really put himself on the map in 88. But he had a really good year in 87 too. But Doug Williams was going up against a team that had just been to the Super Bowl the year before. They had the NFL MVP in John Elway, and they didn't have John Riggins. They didn't have George Rogers. They still had their offensive line, and their defense, a lot of people thought, was ripe for the picking against the Denver Broncos. This is a team that had struggled the week before in the conference championship game, and yes, I do mean a week before, because back then, sometimes Super Bowls were only a week away. But, and it looked bad. Denver came out 10-0, boom, game over. Then the second quarter. Touchdown, 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 touchdown. It was 35-10 at halftime. And it was Doug Williams' show, and I'll tell you, whether you were a fan of the Redskins or not, you were a fan of the Redskins that day, and it was such a great game to watch. And just the intrigue of the Golden Boy versus the Golden Goose story. It was a great Super Bowl from that perspective. The performance, Not so much. Timmy Smith could have rushed for 900 yards and 18 touchdowns in that game. Doug Williams was winning the MVP, period. So kudos to Doug Williams and the Redskins. That was a great moment for the NFL and definitely a very intriguing matchup considering how good of a game those two teams had played in '86. Denver beat them 31-30 in Denver the year before, and Washington had made it to the championship game the year before, and now they were in the Super Bowl. So really cool moment, I thought. E, what's your number? You could talk on this game?
Well, there were split votes in that MVP voting because Timmy Smith, who ran for 204 yards and 2 touchdowns, had to split votes with Ricky Sanders, who caught 9 balls for 193 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they're like, yeah, we'll do it to Doug Williams.
Yeah, that was and Doug Williams earned it. I mean, he played great. All right, what's your number 8?
Number 8, and I seriously feel like a broken record. Number 8 is Super Bowl 48. I have this a lot lower on my intrigue list than on my top 10 all-time list. Peyton Manning's Broncos versus the Legion of Doom defense outside in New York. First ever cold open-air Super Bowl fight. And one team showed up, the other one didn't. Defense was all Seattle in this game, and they whitewashed them by the final score of 43-8. Great defensive showing for one team, bad all around from the other. I mean, the Seahawks scored at will. They scored right before halftime. They got the opening kicks to start the third quarter. They returned that for a touchdown. Percy Harvin did 87 yards. The Seahawks just went off, and they're like, today's our day.
Most intriguing for me, number 8 has to be Super Bowl 42. Giants 17, Patriots 14. I mean, you've got two iconic cities going at it in the Super Bowl in New York and Boston. You've got the Patriots are undefeated. You've got the Giants who really gave them a run for their money in New York at the end of the regular season and kind of exposed something, I think, moving forward. You had, of course, the David Tyree helmet catch. You had the Eli Manning escaping. But to me, this intrigue even went to the end of the game. I don't know how many people realize this about Super Bowl 42, but there was a pass down the sideline that Randy Moss, I don't remember if he dropped it or if it was just overthrown, but he was behind the defense. If he catches it, he scores. Do you remember that, Eric?
Vaguely.
I'm telling you, I'm remembering it that way, and I just remember how confident I was that the Giants were going to win going into that game, but also remembering that, you could say all the pressure was on the Giants because the Patriots had been there. They had won Tom Brady. But this was really the first Super Bowl pre-Spygate. And the Patriots, in my opinion, were yet to win a Super Bowl. Because I don't count those, in my mind, I wasn't counting those first 3. When you play straight up, right? No extra advantage like filming. You get beat 46-10. You get beat 35-21. Now what? And then they lost 17-14. And I remember thinking to myself, obviously the intrigue was the 18-0 record going in. But, and the Giants in these two cities. But at the end of the day, it was New York that came out on top. And still to this day is one of the more intriguing Super Bowls, I think, of all time. Eric, you're number 8. I'm sorry, you're number 7. You're number 7.
All right, my number 7. What was yours again?
Mine was Super Bowl 42.
All right, that's funny because that's my number 7. So I won't
Nice.
go too much into that. But it's Patriots versus Giants. Could New England complete the perfect season? Answer is no. Go ahead, Anthony.
All right. Well, my number 7 is Super Bowl 7. Dolphins 14, Redskins 7. There are a lot of 7s in this conversation right now. 7th heaven, if you will. This Super Bowl was so amazing. Guys, again, I have it. So I've seen it. And, you watch it, and you can feel the excitement in the air in the LA Coliseum that something's about to go down. And you can tell, though, there's no fear in the Redskins, which added, I think, to the intrigue. Because keep in mind, guys, this is 1972. All right? Let's go through the Super Bowls. The NFL destroyed them in Super Bowl I and II. Super Bowl III, the Jets won, and a lot of people think that was tainted, and turned out they were right, but we'll get to that maybe another show. And then, Super Bowl IV, yeah, the Chiefs won, but Super Bowl V was won by the Colts, a former NFL team, okay, who defected to the AFL, a.k.a. the AFC. The Colts, the Browns, and the Steelers all went from the NFL to the AFC when the merger happened, okay? And then the Cowboys, an old NFL team, had won in 71. So a lot of people were like, can the AFC really compete with the NFC? Like, that was still a thing in people's minds. And you have this undefeated Dolphin team. You got the over-the-hill gang in Washington. George Allen's proven everybody in LA, you shouldn't have gotten rid of me. Returning to the Coliseum, believe me, that was a big deal, okay? And, you've got the undefeated Dolphins against the Redskins, who had just beat the crap out of Dallas in the conference championship game, 26-3. Then the block kick during the game that was returned by Bass after the de facto interception for a touchdown to make it 14-7. Think about that. The Dolphins were about to go up 17-0 and complete a 17-0 season in Super Bowl VII. But instead, it all backfired in their face. And Washington had the ball at the end of the game and were driving with a chance to tie it until Bill Kilmer threw an interception. Granted, it was on 4th down and there wasn't much of a chance, and the Dolphins were not going to let them score. Jake Scott won the MVP. What a great game. It might have been 14-7, but it wasn't short on intrigue and it wasn't short on excitement. You're number 70.
All
6.
Right.
Number 6 for you. I keep doing that to you. I'm sorry.
Number 6. Yeah, no worries. Number 6. All right. So I'm just looking at something really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, number 6 for me, Super Bowl 37, Tampa Bay versus Oakland, and the whole storyline and the intrigue in this matchup was Gruden getting to the Super Bowl in his first season with Tampa Bay after being basically traded from Oakland, because Oakland thought that they could move on without Gruden and not suffer any consequences and be better off, and then they get their butts kicked, and I mean by 27 points, and I mean just a heck of a defensive showing by
Derek
Tampa
Brooks.
Bay. Rich Gannon threw 5 interceptions. I'm sure he was hoping if the Rams and Saints could do a do-over, he could get a do-over in this game too. But I mean, that was really the biggest storyline, and what made the intrigue. It was like, what's Gruden going to do in this game? Like, is Tampa going to roll? Are they going to barely win? Is Oakland just going to know exactly how Tampa Bay is going to be, because they had Gruden and now they know his tendencies and whatnot? But it was more like Gruden went to Tampa, molded that team. Bill Callahan did nothing with the Raiders, took what Gruden left, just took them to the Super Bowl, and he got outcoached.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that one later because that's higher on my list, but it's on my list. All right, Eric, I have to say, I don't know if this is on your list or not. This one's going to be cemented at this number 6 for a long time for me. No Super Bowl in the history of this game was more pressure-packed than this game. I'm not going to say the name yet, and I'm not going to give you the Super Bowl number yet, but the winning head coach of this Super Bowl went on record saying that these 2 Super Bowls that we went to took 10 years off of my life and 15 years off of my coaching career because of the pressure that came with it. I'm talking about Vince Lombardi and the Green Bay Packers in Super Bowl I. I'm not even counting Super Bowl II. The pressure and intrigue alone on the first ever Super Bowl. Could the AFL really compete with the NFL? This was not an option for Green Bay to lose. Vince Lombardi and Bart Starr both went on record saying if they lost Super Bowl I, they would have felt like their entire career was a joke, a waste. Now, when you're putting that kind of pressure on you, imagine the kind of pressure that must have been getting put on them from the outside, because no other league had done this before. No other league had said, okay, we'll play your champion in another game, and whoever wins is the ultimate champion between the two leagues. There's no merger yet, okay? So this is truly two competing NFL organizations competing against each other for the ultimate prize. It's revolutionary. It'll never be done again. And the fact that these two teams were 14-10 at halftime and the game was still in doubt. Kansas City was 10-2-1. The Packers were 12-2. They were the two best teams in their respective leagues, and they made it there. And then, of course, 21 second half points for Green Bay, 0 for Kansas City. Ball game over. I don't think this Super Bowl gets enough credit. I don't think this Super Bowl gets enough attention. And I don't think people understand the pressure of the time. Now, I won't say any more than that, Eric. I'll tell you something off air about this Super Bowl. But one of the greatest intriguing moments, maybe in sports history. I'd put it right up there with the 1980 Olympics as far as intrigue. Not as far as outcome, but definitely as far as intrigue. E, take it away.
Yeah, we'll talk about the game later too. It's on my list as well.
Nice, nice.
So
number 5.
My number 6 most intriguing Super Bowl matchup.
Number 5. Number 5.
Sorry, I looked at my list. I count 11 on mine, so I guess I gotta skip one somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number 5 intriguing Super Bowl of all time actually happens in Super Bowl 32, Broncos versus Packers. And John Elway had been to 3 Super Bowls before this, and Brett Favre was just coming off a Super Bowl win as well. And John Elway in 3 previous Super Bowls lost by an average margin of 32 points. Think about that for a moment. 32 points when you're getting blitzed by like literally teams just out of nowhere. And Elway was talking about retirement if he wins the Super Bowl or when he wins the Super Bowl. Coming out of that great class of '83, Marino had been to 1. Kelly had been to 4, and this was John Elway's last hurrah. Saying, I gotta win a Super Bowl. Out of all of us, keep this draft class that was so great. We have to do something that people are gonna remember. So Elway went out, beat the Packers behind an MVP performance by Terrell Davis, beat the Packers 31-24, and everybody remembers the highlight of Elway running, leaping, and getting helicoptered around for a first down, and they ended up scoring on that drive. There was some hard hitting in that game. There was actually a 3-way hit when the Broncos were on defense. I think it was Steve Atwater, if he was still there.
Yep.
If I remember the name correctly.
Yep, Steve Atwater.
Knocked out the Packers receiver and his own defensive back as well.
Tyrone Braxton.
Actually, I heard that today, which I think was hilarious because they're like, you wouldn't see that in a football game ever again. That's when you know football was fun. But Elway finally got his first Super Bowl and ended up winning back-to-back Super Bowls as well. But that was intriguing because I know a lot of eyes and a lot of pressure was on John Elway to finally win the big one.
Well, I hear you, man. So my number 5 most intriguing Super Bowl of all time is actually Super Bowl 17. Strike shortened season. Miami back in the Super Bowl for the first time since 1973. So 9 years later. This was 1982. The Redskins back in the Super Bowl for the first time in 10 years. And the only other time they were in the Super Bowl, who did they play? But the Miami Dolphins in the undefeated season. We talked about that as my number 7 most intriguing Super Bowl. Well, my number 5 most intriguing Super Bowl is the rematch. And I think that's also what's intriguing about it is it's the rematch. You have John Riggins, who was the absolute NFL playoff story that year. You had the Killer Bees that were in full throat. They had just shut down the Jets 14-0 in Miami the week, 2 weeks before, the week before. I think it was a week before. And again, it was the strike-shortened season. So you really didn't know which one of these teams were legit because they had only played up to that point. They had only played, 9, 10, 11, 12 games? This is their 13th game that they were playing against, their fourth playoff game and 9 regular season games. So that's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So there was so much to it. And then you had the 4th and 1. But before the 4th and 1, you had the unbelievable deflection play. Well, let's just go through the whole game, right? Not the whole game. You have the big completion to Cephalo for the touchdown, right? Washington comes storming back. I love what Joe Theismann says here. He's like, let's go 80 yards for a touchdown, and let's take the lead 10-7, or let's take the lead 14-10 against the Miami Dolphins. Let's kick off to Walker, and let's let Walker return it all the way back for a touchdown. So he was obviously like, he was devastated going in the locker room. And then in the second half, what the Redskins did was unbelievable. Not to mention the deflection that Joe Theismann had off of his tip pass. And then, of course, the 4th and 1 run by John Riggins is iconic. And the Redskins win their first NFL title since, the 40s? So there's a lot of intrigue there for me in this game just because of the two teams that were going at it. And a lot of people don't realize this, Eric. It was only the second time in NFL history that the Super Bowl had a rematch. It was only the second time in Super Bowl history that there was a rematch between two teams. Thought that was interesting, too.
Yeah.
So,
great. Up until that time.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. But still, 17 Super Bowls and only 2 rematches, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
You're number 4.
My number 4, I'm throwing this on there. And it's not just because of the game itself, but Super Bowl 20, Bears versus Patriots. Yes, the Bears' 46 defense was just a sight to behold. Walter Payton finally getting to the Super Bowl after spending years on a Bears team in the late 70s and early 80s where they were down. But it wasn't more. It wasn't just the game. It was prior to the game. It was Jim McMahon moving the helicopter. The Bears partying on Bourbon Street like to all hours in the morning. They knew it was one big party for them. They knew that they wanted to go down and have fun in New Orleans. And the funny thing is that New Orleans actually got a cold front that came down during that week, and the Bears could have played outdoors instead of in the Superdome, and it would have felt like they were playing at home because back in Chicago. And I remember this because I actually went outside. We have pictures of us being outside, but it was like 10 degrees out here, and kind of like what it is now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just there was just so much intrigue, like what was going to happen throughout the game. And the Bears actually started out slow. Peyton ended up fumbling. The Patriots took a 3-0 lead. It was like, whoa, like all right, then we got to we got our defense that needs to pick us up, and the defense had themselves a game for the ages. But the offense still contributed, and Peyton didn't get in the end zone, but the Bears still won the Super Bowl, and give the Patriots credit. All they did was they said, we're not letting Walter Payton beat us, and they didn't.
Yeah.
McMahon had a couple of rushing touchdowns. Refrigerator Perry had a touchdown.
Matt Suhey had a game.
Matt Suhey had a game. It was great blocker for Bears, the fullback. Galt had a nice catch down the sideline. They got everybody involved. It was really, truly a team effort, but it was a defense, obviously, that really was like, hey, you know what? This is why we're here.
Nice. The number 4 most intriguing Super Bowl of all time for me is Super Bowl 34. For much of the same reasons as Super Bowl 16. You have 2 franchises the year before had a losing record. You had 2 franchises that had relocated in the last 5 years. Okay? In what was the Houston Oilers was now the Tennessee Titans, and what was the Los Angeles Rams was now the St. Louis Rams. You had Dick Vermeil, who was the Eagles head coach, right, was now the head coach of the Rams, Captain Burnout and the poster child for Burnout, and the head coach of the Titans also was an Eagles coach. He was an assistant under Buddy Ryan before he went to Houston, and then, had revitalized that franchise. You had Air McNair and Eddie George. I was intrigued because Eddie George would have been a Ram if I was a Ram general manager at the time and in charge of the draft. I'm going to say it again. We would have had Orlando Pace, Jonathan Ogden, Eddie George, and Jake Plummer. Don't even get me started. We would have been built to run the table for a very long time. But I digress. It was a great game to boot. Like Super Bowl 16, the Rams run out to this early lead. 9-0 at halftime. It was 20-0 at halftime in that game. They went up 16-0. They blocked a kick. Back came Tennessee to tie it. And this is why the intrigue for me goes a notch higher. This is why it's not lower on the list. And this is why it's not higher on the list. As I said before, with the inefficiencies of the game, the missed kicks, some of the sloppy play, the nerves that was evident. But it all comes down to one play at the end of the game. And McNair completes it to his credit. Dyson catches it to his credit, but Mike Jones does exactly what he's supposed to do in that particular moment and then makes the tackle, which had been a Ram problem for decades, missing tackles like that and losing the game at the end. What a great Super Bowl, but the intrigue going in. Two franchises with similar roads, both had 13-3 records, both had played each other in the regular season, just like the Niners and Bengals. The Niners went to Cincinnati and beat them there. The Rams went to Tennessee, and if it wasn't for a crazy false start penalty, would have probably beaten Tennessee in Tennessee. Just a great game. Just a great game all the way around, and great intrigue leading up. So for me, Super Bowl 34. Oh, that's the other final thing on this, as far as the intrigue. If the Rams win, and they would end up winning, they would be the only franchise in professional sports to have won 3 championships in 3 different cities. They won in Cleveland in 45, LA in 51, and then St. Louis in 99. And to this day, they're the only franchise that has that moniker. So, kind of cool. Anyway, Eric, what is your number 3, unless you want to comment on the Super Bowl?
No, my number 3 is Super Bowl 34. You see, there's 2 franchises who took similar roads. You had Eric McNair, you had Eddie George, and you had Kurt Warner and Marshall Faulk. And if Anthony was the GM, he would have had Eddie George. And, okay, wait. So, yeah, my number 3 is Super Bowl 34, greatest show on turf. And,
nice.
I got to give it, they ran, did they run up the score a lot of teams back in 99? Yes and no. I mean, everybody was mad about the Patriots doing it during their season, but, the Rams kind of did it too. They put a whooping on a lot of teams.
Oh, yeah.
But, the Titans, the defense, they came up to play, and, they kept it close. The funny thing is 2 of my intriguing games, which include the Bucks and Raiders in their Super Bowl, and then the Rams and Titans in their Super Bowl, is that when the Raiders scored 3 straight touchdowns. They went for 2-point conversion each time and failed. The Titans were down 16-0. They scored a touchdown, made it 16-6 because they missed the 2-point conversion. If Al Del Greco hits possibly even his first field goal because he missed 2, maybe the Titans don't go for 2, and instead, he makes those 3 field goals instead of only 1. Then you're talking about a 6-point game, and who knows, Tennessee at that time, of course we're playing what if, could be driving for the field goal in that last drive. But, they needed a touchdown, and, when you can't convert kicks and you can't make 2-point conversions, a lot of the game changes and you're down by more than a field goal, and the Rams were able to win by a yard. And that was the closest game to get to a possible overtime in Super Bowl history until a game actually did go into overtime.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was a great Super Bowl to boot, one of the best of all time. All right, my number 3 is Super Bowl 37. Tampa Bay Buccaneers 48, Oakland Raiders 21. A lot of the reasons you talked about, Eric, the John Gruden going to Tampa Bay, and then the Raiders end up making the Super Bowl anyway without John Gruden. The Buccaneers in the Super Bowl in itself was, especially to a purist like me, it's like, the Buccaneers? The most ridiculously bad franchise in the NFL, the worst franchise in the NFL, the Buccaneers. I know Tampa Bay had made it to the playoffs a few times and had a pretty decent run there at the end of the 90s. But we're talking about the Buccaneers against the Raiders? One of the most iconic franchises in the NFL and certainly in the AFC. I don't care if it's John Gruden or Vince Lombardi over there. The Buccaneers ain't winning. Then Dexter Jackson decided to say, F you, Anthony. Couple picks, one return for a touchdown. Derek Brooks decides to absolutely destroy any and everyone in his wake. And I remember watching this game at Jim's house, and I remember the Raiders, first drive, getting sacked by Warren Sapp and the Buccaneers defense, and I'm like, oh my goodness. This is not good. But the intrigue going in, all of the talk going in, you're talking about two franchises that were polar opposites. I mean, the Buccaneers, as bad as they are now, they were worse back then. They set a franchise record for the most consecutive 10-loss seasons in NFL history. Okay? I want to say it was from 1984 to 1995. They lost 10 games or more every year. It was a running joke. And then here we are, 2002. They're in the Super Bowl. So there was a lot of intrigue on this game. Jerry Rice in an Oakland Raider uniform, that was intriguing. Obviously, the coaching storyline, a lot of fun. But Tim Brown, is he going to get his first championship? A lot of intrigue. Great game going into, but the Buccaneers obliterated the Raiders and didn't even make this game close.
Funny thing is that for this game, I started wearing my Tim Brown jersey, and I really quickly took it off.
All right, number 2, Eric. What's your number 2?
Number 2, most intriguing Super Bowl matchup is Super Bowl III, Jets versus Colts. Joe Namath guarantees a victory. And, it was a victory more for football because if, there's a real possibility that if the Jets don't win the game over the Colts, that the AFL, I heard rumors could have folded after that, and it would have just been everybody left in the NFL. But it really helped solidify getting the AFL teams into all under one moniker, being the NFL, and that's why it's so intriguing. You can talk all you want about maybe a fix if you want, but it's something maybe that was a good fix that needed to happen to grow the sport,
especially back then. And look, I think Don Shula might have been in on it. Hence why I think he gets an undefeated season shortly thereafter. But I don't think any of the players were in on it. I think that maybe if the fix was in, they spoke to the two coaches, they spoke to the referees, and they spoke to the two owners and said, if you do this, we're going to do you a favor. And the Jets were probably told, don't you dare ask for another favor. We're giving you one. Maybe that's why the Jets have never been back. Who knows? But that's intrigue in itself. For me, the intrigue of Super Bowl III is not just the game and what came of it, because you're 100% right on all of that. That in itself should put it on my list, and I'm a little ashamed that it isn't. But the intrigue after the game, to me, is what really puts this Super Bowl in another stratosphere. But it's not on my list. The number 2 most intriguing Super Bowl of all time, we've already talked about. Super Bowl 13. Battle for the 70s. That's what this was. It was a rematch. It was the first ever rematch in Super Bowl history between two teams. The Cowboys were, as I said before, they were the defending world champions. Pittsburgh had already won 2 Super Bowls. This was their 3rd. This was Dallas's 5th. Roger Staubach, Terry Bradshaw, Lynn Swann, Drew Pearson. You had Jackie Harris. You had John Stallworth. You had Mean Joe Green, Randy White, Chuck Howley. I mean, this game had everybody. Chuck Noll, Tom Landry couldn't be any more different on the sidelines as far as coaches go. 2 franchises that, and I think too, for me, what makes this Super Bowl one of the most intriguing of all time is, if it's not for this Super Bowl matchup in 1978, And if it's not for what the franchises had respectively already done through the course of the decade, I don't think Dallas and Pittsburgh are as iconic today as they are. I will tell you right now, I don't like either of these teams. Okay? But I will tell you, if they play in a Super Bowl, it's must-see TV even for me. And this Super Bowl was a classic example of just intrigue to the highest and what was going to happen. Because, like I said, the team of the decade was at stake here. If Dallas wins, they're the team of the decade. They got 3 titles. They've been to 6 Super Bowls or 5 Super Bowls. It's over, man. Conversation's done. The best Pittsburgh can do is win a 3rd Super Bowl the following year, and they split with Dallas, but Dallas went to more. Intrigue to the highest. Eric, you're number 2. Number 1. You're number 1.
Well, my number 1 starts with number 1. Green Bay versus Kansas City, Super Bowl 1. That's first Super Bowl. I mean, you've already touched on quite a bit of it, but if Green Bay loses even the first 2 Super Bowls and the Jets win Super Bowl 3, instead of the NFL, we're playing in the AFL.
Yeah.
There's not much more to say. Yeah, it stinks that Green Bay won back-to-back Super Bowls, and the Bears were pitiful in the 60s, and I mean they owned the 40s, but they were bad in the 60s. They had some really good players back in that time too. But you got to give it. I mean, it wasn't a must-see event back then. It was okay, Super Bowl game. I mean, we're talking 1967.
Yeah.
I mean, two years later, Neil Armstrong, or is it 63? But in the 60s, you had Neil Armstrong walking on the moon.
That was 69.
This other stuff.
That was 69. You were right. You were right the
so
first
2
time.
years later,
Yeah.
So I mean, you had all these different huge events going on throughout the 60s, and
Kennedy's assassination, Martin Luther King's assassination.
Yeah. And so, if football wasn't at the top of anybody's list, I mean, it was actually broadcast on tape delay. They didn't. I mean, sure they played out in L.A. at the Memorial Coliseum because they want to host such a big event and get it out there. But it wasn't one of those. I got to have a ticket to this game, this must-see sporting event. But it grew after that, and it grew with Green Bay and Oakland playing in the Orange Bowl, the second Super Bowl, and it grew with the Jets, especially when Namath guarantees victory. And then it just takes off from there.
Mm-hmm.
Slowly but surely, it just takes off. And you can't just jump into something and make it great without having to start slowly first, and that's what Super Bowl 1 and 2 really did.
Yeah.
And it was and you got to have something first before you could have more than one. And so, the first Super Bowl, that's why it's intriguing to me.
My number 1 most intriguing Super Bowl of all time is fascinating. And maybe I'm looking at it from a different perspective. You're right, everything that you said about Super Bowl 1, and that's why it's on my list. But I don't think there's ever been a more intriguing Super Bowl than this. Okay? I don't care if I sound like a homer. Super Bowl 53 is the most intriguing Super Bowl of all time, and I don't even know what the score is. But this is already the most intriguing Super Bowl of all time. The controversy surrounding the Rams getting there, the aggravation of the Patriots getting there. You've got the 2 franchises that are directly responsible for fumbling their own dynasty opportunity and the other team taking it from them. The fact that it's a rematch, the fact that it's literally the script is flipped. The Rams don't stand a chance. They might as well get on a plane and fly home tonight because the Patriots are going to win. It's not even because of experience. I mean, it's not like, as I said on my show today, it's not like the Rams have beaten a future Hall of Famer in Drew. It's not like the Rams haven't beaten a future Hall of Famer in Philip. It's not like the Rams haven't beaten a really good quarterback. I mean, who have they beaten? I mean, Pat Mahomes. But yet, all of the storyline is how New England might as well be celebrating the trophy now. But when you've got the Patriots against the Rams, with everything we know went down 17, 19, whatever long it was now, years ago, 17 years ago, this has so much intrigue to it. And the NFL, quite honestly, has botched it. I have never laughed so hard at the lack of preparation that these so-called experts on the NFL Network and ESPN and all these other network stations, radio, podcasts, you name it, they obviously never watched a Ram game this year, outside of maybe the playoffs and highlights, because they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to the LA Rams. And just what could happen moving forward, I don't think there's ever been a more fascinating Super Bowl, because you could theoretically have one franchise take the dynasty away from the current dynasty, and that current dynasty had originally gotten its dynasty by taking it away from the very team that could win it on Sunday. I've never seen a full circle 20 years later happen like this before. I'm not even Super Bowl 10 and Super Bowl 30 had this kind of cyclical thing to it. It's really fascinating, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, we'll find out for all the marbles on Sunday, but I mean, wouldn't it be ironic if Kurt Warner was still your quarterback?
That would be unbelievable. He'd be, what, 50? How old is the guy? I mean, that would be something else.
I mean, come on, Brady's still a quarterback.
I think, honestly, Eric, I think it's perfect that we have a quarterback like Jared Goff. This quarterback that no one likes, that no one wants to give credit to, that no one believes in, could be the very guy that kills the Patriot dynasty and starts his own.
Didn't the Eagles kill the Patriot dynasty last year?
No, the Patriots made it back to the Super Bowl.
Exactly. So, I mean, even if the Rams win, let's just say the Patriots don't go back next year.
Right, and then it's a different It's a different thing. But if they don't go back, you can't say the Eagles killed it when they lost one more time. You know what I mean? So, plus there's...
If New England's not getting back next year, then it must be Pittsburgh, right? I mean, it's got to be Ben Roethlisberger.
And could you imagine a Rams-Steeler rematch for Super Bowl freaking 54? Literally 40 years later, they play again. That would be hilarious. Oh, my God. Don't get my hopes up. All right. Listen, that's a wrap for the top 10 most intriguing. A little bit of a surprise maybe for my number one, but I really believe this is the most intriguing Super Bowl we've ever had, just because of all the potential storylines, even if the media was ill-prepared for it. Coming up next, tomorrow, or when I post this, will be the final installment of our top 10 Super Bowls, top 10 Super Bowl blowouts.